Welcome to Glow Dreams, where each night we guide you to deep, peaceful sleep, carried by soothing stories and calming sounds. As the year draws to a close, take a deep breath and let yourself settle into the gentle embrace of the moment. Feel the softness of your surroundings, as if the world has wrapped you in a comforting blanket. The air around you is crisp yet calming, carrying the subtle scent of winter snow. Imagine yourself standing in a quiet town square, illuminated by the warm glow of lanterns strung across the streets. Snowflakes drift lazily through the air, catching the golden light like tiny, falling stars. Let your thoughts float freely as you take another slow breath. Inhale the hope and promise of a fresh beginning, and exhale any lingering weight of the past. With each breath, you feel lighter, more open to the magic of this evening. Picture the distant sound of bells, soft at first, but growing clearer as you listen. These are not ordinary bells. They ring with a rich, melodic resonance that seems to awaken something deep within you. They carry the promise of renewal, the whisper of stories yet to unfold. As you walk toward the sound, the snow crunches softly beneath your feet. Each step feels deliberate, grounding you in the present while guiding you toward the possibilities ahead. Around you, the town glimmers with life. Icicles hang from rooftops, catching the light like delicate crystals. The shop windows are frosted, each one a tiny vignette of warmth and cheer. You pass a small bakery, the scent of fresh bread mingling with the cold air. Further ahead, a quaint bookstore beckons with its soft, golden glow spilling out onto the street. It feels inviting, as if it's waiting just for you. You pause for a moment, taking in the scene. The world feels still, yet alive with anticipation. The bells are closer now, their chimes echoing through the streets, weaving a melody that stirs your heart. You feel a gentle sense of wonder, as if you're on the edge of something extraordinary, a moment of connection, a story waiting to begin. With each breath, you become part of this magical scene. The snow, the lights, the bells, they all seem to harmonize, wrapping you in their spell. Let yourself linger in this space, where time feels suspended and possibilities stretch endlessly before you. As you prepare to step further into the story, carry with you the warmth of this moment. Allow the magic of the new year to guide you, filling your heart with the promise of new beginnings. Let the gentle rhythm of the bells lead you onward, toward a night filled with wonder and dreams. The snow fell gently, transforming the small town into a dreamscape of soft whites and glowing lights. Each flake seemed to carry a delicate whisper of the season, drifting lazily through the air before settling on rooftops and cobblestone streets. It was New Year's Eve, and the town buzzed quietly with the energy of shared anticipation. The festive charm of the place felt almost otherworldly, as though time itself had paused to admire the beauty of this night. The heart of the town, its quaint square, was alive with subtle motion and sound. Golden lights strung across buildings glowed warmly, their reflections dancing in the frosted windows. A small crowd moved leisurely, their laughter and murmured conversations blending with the soft crunch of boots on snow. Each face seemed touched by the season's magic, their breaths visible in the chilly air like puffs of smoke that dissipated into the night. Among them, Clara stood quietly, her steps unhurried and deliberate. She had returned to this town, her childhood home, for the first time in years, drawn back not by longing but by duty. Her family's invitations had grown persistent, and she had finally conceded. Yet now, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds, she couldn't deny the subtle pull of nostalgia. As she wandered through the square, memories of past New Year's Eves came flooding back. She recalled standing with her parents under the clock tower, their hands tightly clasped around hers as the bells rang in the new year. She could almost hear her father's deep laughter as he hoisted her onto his shoulders so she could see the fireworks better. Her mother's warm voice telling her to make a wish for the year ahead echoed faintly in her mind. There were other moments, too, smaller, quieter ones that felt just as vivid. She remembered the time she had tripped while running across the icy square and how a kind stranger had helped her up, their shared laughter easing her embarrassment. She could still picture the group of local kids building a massive snowman near the fountain, its crooked carrot nose making everyone giggle. The memories brought a soft smile to her lips. It wasn't just the town she missed, it was the person she had been back then, carefree, hopeful, and open to all the little wonders life had to offer. Tonight, the town seemed to whisper to her, inviting her to rediscover that part of herself. Her gaze drifted across the square, landing on a familiar sight tucked into the far corner, the little bookstore she had loved as a child. Its frosted windows glowed softly, just as she remembered. Clara's heart swelled with a mix of nostalgia and curiosity. That bookstore had been her sanctuary, a place where she had spent countless afternoons lost in stories that took her far beyond the boundaries of the small town. Without realizing it, her steps carried her closer. The golden light spilling through the cracks in the curtains felt like a warm embrace, and for a moment, she could almost hear the soft rustle of pages and the faint crackle of the old fireplace inside. The sight of the bookstore brought back a vivid memory of the first book she had ever bought with her allowance, a well-worn copy of The Secret Garden that still sat on her bookshelf to this day. Clara paused just a few steps away, letting the memory wash over her. It felt as though the bookstore had been waiting for her, its quiet presence calling her back to a simpler, more magical time. Her heart swelled with a quiet sense of longing, and she found herself wondering what stories might be waiting for her inside tonight. Inside the cozy bookstore, the scent of aged paper and candle wax filled the air, blending with the faint crackle of a fire burning low in the stone hearth. Clara felt an immediate sense of calm as she stepped further into the space. The golden glow of the firelight danced on the shelves, illuminating rows of books, their spines worn and weathered with age. This place felt timeless, a pocket of serenity in the bustling thoughts that had occupied her mind for months. Near the fireplace, a man sat in a high-backed armchair, engrossed in a book. He was framed by the flickering light, his relaxed posture and thoughtful expression blending seamlessly with the atmosphere of the bookstore. Clara hesitated. She wasn't sure whether to disturb him, but something about his quiet presence felt inviting, as though he belonged to the space in the same way the books did. "Is it always this peaceful here?" she finally asked, her voice soft but clear enough to carry across the room. The man glanced up, a flicker of surprise on his face quickly replaced by a welcoming smile. "It depends," he said, his tone warm. "Peaceful, yes, but never dull. These walls hold stories that never seem to rest." Encouraged by his response, Clara stepped closer, her boots making almost no sound on the polished wooden floor. "It feels like stepping into another world," she said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "It often does," the man replied, closing his book and placing it gently on the small table beside him. "Are you looking for something in particular?" Clara shook her head. "Not really. Maybe just a bit of quiet," she admitted, her words carrying the weight of the past year's challenges. "Well," the man said, gesturing to the chair across from him, "this is as good a place as any to find it." She hesitated for a moment before taking the seat he offered. "I'm Clara," she said, extending a hand. "Lucas," he replied, shaking her hand briefly. His grip was firm but gentle, a small gesture that somehow added to the comforting ambience of the space. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence between them filled by the occasional pop of the fire and the soft rustle of snowflakes brushing against the window panes. It was Lucas who broke the silence. "So, what brings you to this little corner of the world on New Year's Eve?" Clara exhaled softly, her breath forming a faint cloud in the cool air of the room. "I grew up here," she said, "but I've been living in the city for years. Coming back felt necessary." Lucas nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The city can be overwhelming," he said. "Sometimes you need to return to where things make sense." His words resonated with her more than she expected. "And you?" she asked. "What brings you here?" "Something similar, I suppose," Lucas said, a faint smile touching his lips. "I've always felt a strange connection to this bookstore," Lucas said, his voice thoughtful as his gaze swept across the room. "It's like an old friend you haven't seen in years. But when you do, it feels as though no time has passed at all." They fell into an easy rhythm of conversation, speaking of books and memories, of places they'd been and places they longed to see. Lucas shared stories of his childhood summers spent exploring the forests surrounding the town, of snowy winters when he and his siblings would build forts that lasted for weeks. His words painted vivid pictures, and Clara found herself smiling, feeling a warmth she hadn't realized she'd been missing. At one point, Lucas stood and walked over to a nearby shelf. He ran his fingers lightly across the spines before pulling out a slim, leather-bound volume. "Here," he said, handing it to Clara. "This one's about second chances. I think you might like it." Clara took the book, her fingers brushing against his. The brief touch sent a spark through her, a fleeting but undeniable sense of connection. She opened the book, her eyes skimming the handwritten notes in the margins. "You annotate your books?" she asked, intrigued. Lucas nodded. "Only the ones that matter," he said. "Sometimes those little notes help me find my way back to something important." "That's beautiful," Clara said softly, turning the pages carefully. Each note felt like a glimpse into a mind both thoughtful and introspective, a reflection of the person sitting across from her. As the hours passed, the conversation deepened, shifting from lighthearted anecdotes to more personal reflections. Clara spoke of her life in the city, the constant noise and pressure that had driven her to seek refuge in her hometown. Lucas listened intently, his gaze steady and reassuring, as though her words were the only ones that mattered. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the town in an even deeper silence. Inside the bookstore, time seemed to stretch, the night unfolding in slow, deliberate moments. The sound of the bells outside began to grow louder, signaling that midnight was approaching. Lucas glanced toward the window, his smile tinged with quiet anticipation. "Shall we step outside to welcome the new year?" he asked. Clara hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Together, they donned their coats and scarves, the warmth of the bookstore lingering as they stepped into the crisp night air. The square was alive with a quiet energy, townsfolk gathering beneath the glowing lanterns as the bells began their final countdown. Standing side by side, Clara and Lucas watched as the clock struck 12, the sound of the bells ringing clear and pure across the snow-covered square. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over her, a symbolic cleansing of the past year. When she opened her eyes, Lucas was watching her, his expression soft and thoughtful. "Happy New Year," he said. "Happy New Year," she replied, her voice carrying a warmth that matched the newfound lightness in her heart. As the bells continued to ring, they stood together in the snow, the night full of unspoken possibilities. The bells of the clock tower rang clear and resonant, their deep tones carrying through the snow-laden air and echoing across the small town square. Each chime seemed to mark the passing of something weighty, something timeless. The townsfolk, gathered beneath the clock tower's stately shadow, stood still in reverent anticipation, their breaths visible in the frosty air as delicate clouds that dissolved into the night. Clara and Lucas stood side by side, their coats buttoned snugly against the cold. The golden glow of lanterns bathed their faces in soft light, and the faint rustle of snow underfoot was the only sound besides the bell's rhythmic call. Clara felt a peculiar sense of calm, as though the entire world had paused for this singular moment. The clock tower, a proud relic of the town's history, loomed above them. Its intricately designed facade bore the marks of time, worn carvings, a clock face that seemed ageless yet imbued with quiet authority. Each chime carried a weight that resonated deeply within her, like a reminder of the countless years it had overseen the town's celebrations, sorrows, and fleeting moments of joy. Clara glanced at Lucas, who was gazing upward at the clock tower with an expression that mirrored her own, a mix of awe and quiet reflection. The firelight from the lanterns danced in his eyes, and for a moment, she wondered what thoughts the bells might have stirred in him. "Do you feel it?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "The weight of the moment," he said. "Yes. It's as if time itself has slowed down, letting us catch up." She nodded, letting his words settle over her. There was something undeniable about this moment, something that seemed to transcend the ordinary passage of time. The bells tolled again, their sound reverberating through her chest, grounding her in the present even as her thoughts drifted to the past and future. The square had taken on an almost otherworldly quality. Snowflakes fell in gentle spirals, catching the golden light like fragments of starlight. Children huddled close to their parents, their excitement evident in the way they clung to hands and scarves, their eyes wide with wonder. Couples stood arm in arm, their shared warmth visible in their closeness. Even the shop windows seemed alive, their frosted panes glowing faintly, a reflection of the lantern's radiance. Lucas broke the silence between them. "Do you know the legend of this clock tower?" he asked, his voice carrying a note of intrigue. Clara shook her head. "No. I remember standing here as a child, but I never heard the story." He smiled, the kind of smile that hinted at a tale worth telling. "They say it was built over a century ago by a clockmaker who wanted to create something that would outlast him, something that would remind people of the value of time. But there's more to it than that." "What else?" she prompted, drawn in by the quiet intensity of his voice. Lucas leaned slightly closer, his tone soft and conspiratorial. The clockmaker believed that the bells had the power to reveal truths to those who listened carefully. That in the moments when they rang, you could hear what your heart truly longed for. Clara tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "Do you believe that?" Lucas's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he turned back to the clock tower. "I think it depends on whether you're ready to listen." The next chime seemed to fill the air with a resonance that felt almost tangible, a vibration that stirred something deep within Clara. She closed her eyes, not to shut out the world, but to let the sound envelop her fully. In that moment, memories surfaced unbidden, her childhood laughter beneath the clock tower, the warmth of her parents' hands holding hers, the bittersweet ache of leaving this town behind. When she opened her eyes, Lucas was watching her, his expression soft but searching. "What did you hear?" he asked. She hesitated, the weight of the question settling over her. "I heard," she paused, searching for the right words. "A reminder of what I've lost and what I still have." He nodded, as though her answer was exactly what he had expected. The bells have a way of doing that. The next chime marked midnight, its sound clear and pure, cutting through the stillness like a beacon. The townsfolk erupted into quiet cheers, their voices filled with the hope and joy of a new beginning. Couples exchanged kisses, children clapped their mittened hands, and even the oldest among them smiled at the simple beauty of the moment. Clara and Lucas stood apart from the revelry, their shared silence more profound than any words could have been. The bells continued to ring, each tone a reminder that time, for all its fleeting nature, was still filled with possibility. Lucas turned to her, his breath visible in the cold air. "Happy New Year," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "Happy New Year," she replied, her own voice carrying the weight of newfound clarity. For a moment, they simply stood there, the snow falling softly around them, the clock tower standing sentinel over their shared stillness. Clara felt a quiet sense of wonder, as though the bells had indeed revealed something she hadn't known she was searching for. Lucas broke the silence. "There's something magical about this town, isn't there?" She nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "It's more than just the place. It's the people, the stories." He returned her smile. "And the chance encounters." The warmth in his voice was matched by the warmth in her chest. The bells began to quiet, their final chime echoing into the night before fading completely. The square began to disperse as the townsfolk retreated to the warmth of their homes, their laughter and chatter fading into the distance. But Clara and Lucas lingered, neither of them ready to leave the moment behind. The clock tower, now silent, seemed to watch over them, its presence a quiet reminder of the time they had shared and the possibilities yet to come. As they finally turned to leave, their footsteps crunching softly in the snow, Clara glanced back at the clock tower. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace, a sense that she was exactly where she needed to be. And beside her, Lucas walked with the same quiet certainty, as though he, too, had found something he hadn't known he was looking for. The snow continued its gentle descent as Clara and Lucas strolled away from the square, their footsteps soft against the freshly fallen snow. The air was cold, crisp, and quiet, save for the faint whisper of the wind weaving through the empty streets. The clock tower's chimes lingered in the air like a fading melody, an echo of the night's turning point. Lucas slowed his pace, turning to Clara with a thoughtful smile. "It doesn't feel like the night should end yet, does it?" he said softly, his voice carrying an invitation. "Would you like to come back to the bookstore? I think it might be the perfect place to let this evening linger a little longer." Clara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'd like that. I've been curious about your bookstore all night." With the quiet understanding of two people savoring an unspoken connection, they turned toward the familiar little shop at the corner of the square. When they reached it, Lucas pulled open the heavy wooden door, and the soft chime of the bell greeted them. Warmth rushed out to meet the night's chill, carrying with it the comforting scent of old books and the faint, earthy aroma of burning wood. Inside, the bookstore was just as inviting as before. The fire in the stone hearth flickered gently, casting a golden glow over the rows of bookshelves. Clara instinctively moved toward a chair by the window, where she could still see the snowflakes drifting outside. Lucas, with practiced ease, stoked the fire before joining her, carrying 2 steaming cups of tea. "This place has always felt timeless," Clara said softly, wrapping her hands around the warm mug he handed her. "It's like the world outside doesn't exist when you're here." Lucas smiled, sitting across from her and cradling his own cup. "That's exactly why I fell in love with it," he replied. "But this place wasn't always mine." Clara tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "How did it become yours, then?" Lucas took a sip of his tea, his gaze momentarily drifting to the fire. "A few years ago, my life looked very different. I had a demanding job in the city, one of those careers that consumes you if you let it. And I did let it. I thought success meant being constantly busy, always chasing the next milestone. But I was wrong." Clara watched him intently, sensing the weight of his words. He continued, his voice steady yet tinged with emotion. "That life cost me more than I realized. My relationships suffered, and eventually, so did my health. When it all fell apart, I felt lost. So, one day, I just left. I drove without a destination, searching for something I couldn't quite name. And you found this town, Clara said gently, her voice almost a whisper. Lucas nodded, a faint smile softening his features. I stumbled upon this place by accident. It was quiet, peaceful, everything my life wasn't. And then I walked into this bookstore. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but I picked up a book and read a line that changed everything. What did it say? Clara asked, leaning forward slightly. It said, "The meaning of life is not in how much you achieve, but in how deeply you live each moment." Lucas's voice carried the reverence of someone recounting a profound revelation. It hit me in a way I didn't expect. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I realized I didn't need to chase anything anymore. Clara sat quietly, letting his words settle over her. She felt an ache of recognition in his story, a reminder of the constant pressure she had placed on herself. "And that's when you decided to stay?" she asked. Lucas nodded again. "I started coming back to this bookstore every day. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could think and just be. When I learned the owner wanted to retire, I decided to buy it. I didn't know the first thing about running a bookstore, but I knew I couldn't let this place go. And now?" Clara asked, a small smile playing at her lips. "Do you regret it?" "Not for a second," Lucas said firmly. "This bookstore gave me a second chance. It taught me to slow down, to listen, not just to the world, but to myself." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, not just from the tea, but from the sincerity in his voice. "I think you've created something really special here," she said. "This place feels alive, like it has its own soul." Lucas smiled, his eyes meeting hers. "And tonight, I feel like it found its purpose all over again." For a moment, the two of them sat in a comfortable silence, the crackling of the fire and the rustle of snow against the window filling the room. Outside, the world was still and white, as if the snow had hushed the entire town into a gentle slumber. Clara finally broke the silence, her voice soft but resolute. "Lucas, I think I've been running from myself for a long time. Always chasing something, afraid to stop because I didn't want to face the quiet. But tonight, I think I've found the courage to pause." Lucas nodded, his gaze steady and full of understanding. "The quiet can be intimidating," he said. "But it's in those moments of stillness that we find clarity." She smiled, the warmth in her expression matching the glow of the fire. "Thank you for sharing your story. It's given me a lot to think about." Lucas returned her smile, lifting his cup in a small toast. "To new beginnings," he said. "To new beginnings," Clara echoed, her voice carrying the weight of a promise to herself. The night stretched on, but neither of them seemed to notice. Their conversation meandered like a gentle stream, flowing from one topic to another. They spoke of books and memories, of dreams and fears, of the moments that had shaped them and the ones they hoped were yet to come. And as the firelight flickered and the snow continued to fall outside, they both felt a quiet certainty this was a night they would carry with them long after the last snowflake had melted. The golden lanterns that had lit the square through the night began to dim as dawn stretched its pale light across the snow-covered town. The air, still crisp and cold, carried the faint scent of pine and wood smoke, mingling with the quiet stillness that settled over the streets. Clara and Lucas remained on the bench, their breath forming soft clouds as they spoke in low, unhurried voices, as though they were reluctant to let the night slip away. The clock tower stood tall behind them, its silhouette framed by the gentle hues of morning. Its chimes had long since fallen silent, yet their echoes seemed to linger in the air, a reminder of the promises made and truths revealed beneath its watchful gaze. The town, slowly stirring to life, offered the occasional sound of a shutter opening or the crunch of boots on fresh snow. But these interruptions only added to the serenity of the moment. Clara shifted slightly, her hands buried deep in the pockets of her coat. She turned her gaze toward Lucas, who was watching the soft light play across the rooftops. His profile, illuminated by the muted glow of dawn, carried a quiet strength, as if the stillness of the night had become a part of him. "I can't remember the last time I felt this peaceful," Clara said softly, her voice breaking the silence without disturbing it. "It's like the weight I've been carrying for so long has finally lifted." Lucas nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's strange how a place can do that to you," he said. Or maybe it's not the place. It's the moments you find there. She smiled, her breath warm in the cold air. Or the people, she added, her gaze meeting his. Lucas looked at her, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Perhaps it's all of those things, he said, his voice quiet but full of meaning. The first rays of sunlight broke over the distant hills, casting a soft glow over the square. The snow shimmered like a blanket of tiny stars, each flake catching the light and reflecting it back as if the world itself was waking with a quiet kind of magic. Clara felt the warmth of the moment settle in her chest, a reminder that even the simplest of mornings could hold something extraordinary. I used to think New Year's was just another day, she said, her voice carrying a reflective tone. But this year feels different. It feels significant. Lucas leaned back slightly, his hands resting on his knees. It's because you've given yourself the chance to pause, he said. To listen. Most of us rush through life without ever really hearing what it's trying to tell us. She nodded, his words resonating deeply. And now that I've heard it, she said, I don't want to forget. You won't, Lucas said gently. Moments like these, they stay with you. For a while, they sat in silence, letting the soft sounds of the town waking fill the space between them. The warmth of their conversation lingered, like the glow of the fire they had left behind in the bookstore. Clara felt as though the night had woven a thread between them, an unspoken understanding that transcended the brevity of their time together. As the sun climbed higher, the square began to stir with more purpose. A baker swept snow from his doorstep, the smell of fresh bread wafting faintly through the air. A child's laughter echoed from a nearby alley, the sound light and carefree. The town, slowly returning to its rhythm, seemed to welcome the new day with quiet optimism. Lucas turned to Clara, his expression thoughtful. Will you stay? He asked, the simplicity of the question carrying unexpected weight. Clara hesitated, her gaze drifting to the clock tower. I don't know, she admitted. But I think I'll come back. His smile was faint but genuine. Sometimes that's all it takes, a promise to yourself to return. She looked at him, her heart full of gratitude for the quiet strength he had offered her throughout the night. What about you? She asked. Will you stay? Lucas's gaze lingered on the snow-covered square, the faintest trace of nostalgia in his eyes. For a little while, he said, "There's something about this place that feels worth holding on to." The sun, now fully risen, cast long shadows across the square, its light softening the edges of the world. Clara stood, brushing snow from her coat as she turned to face Lucas. "Thank you," she said simply, her words carrying more weight than they seemed. Lucas rose as well, his movements unhurried. "Thank you," he replied, his voice warm, "for the conversation, for being here." They stood for a moment longer, the quiet between them rich with meaning. Then, with a final shared smile, they began to walk toward opposite ends of the square. Clara's footsteps left faint prints in the snow, her path marked by a renewed sense of purpose. She felt lighter, as though the night had given her something she hadn't known she needed. Lucas, too, walked with a sense of calm, his presence blending seamlessly with the stillness of the morning. The clock tower watched over them both, its silent face a witness to the promises they had made, not just to each other, but to themselves. And as the town came fully alive, its streets filled with the quiet hum of a new day, the memory of the night lingered in the air, a reminder that even the most fleeting of moments could carry the deepest truths. As the story gently fades, your breathing becomes slower and deeper, settling into a peaceful rhythm. Imagine yourself immersed in the magic of the new year, feeling the soft touch of infinite possibilities gently infusing warmth into your heart. With each slow breath, you are quietly guided into an even deeper state of relaxation. Perhaps this year will bring unexpected connections, new opportunities, or even a story uniquely your own. For now, all the noise of the day has faded away, leaving only the calm embrace of the night gently wrapping around you. Without any effort, you have already entered a dream filled with hope and tranquility. In this space, time seems to pause, and the tapestry of dreams begins to unfold softly. We are grateful to have shared this magical evening with you. Good night, and sweet dreams.